Good day. My name is Gustavo. I will be the chairman during this new presentation block. We shall start with Howard Schneider's presentation, the navigation map-based cognitive architecture, a new class of artificial intelligence. Howard, are you ready to share your screen?
I'm there. Can you see my screen? Can you hear me clearly?
We can hear you. We can see your presentation. So you have 15 minutes to present your work. That will be followed by 5 minutes of questions from the audience.
Perfect. I will start. And again, hello to everyone. It's nice to be at another BICA conference. I'm Howard Schneider from Toronto, Canada. See here. I'll be talking today about the navigation map-based cognitive architecture. And these two words, navigation map, nothing fancy. Think of a map and a type of cognitive architecture. And the theme of my talk is this is really a new class of artificial intelligence. There's many ways to achieve intelligence or natural intelligence, artificial intelligence. This is a differential analyzer. A number of them, large ones, were built in the 1930s, 1940s. They could do solve differential equations, do integration. And, you know, if an electronics industry hadn't developed, probably people would have made inventions or been more cogs, more gears. And, you know, as the years went by, this would have done more of the things that, you know, that computers can do for us now, although, you know, they are quite large. There are really two main ways that people use to make systems intelligent. There's symbolic logic, GOFI, good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, if then, if this, if then, neural networks, and there's a variety of them, artificial neural networks, spiky neural networks. However, today I'm going to be talking about navigation maps, and I believe this is what our brains, what the brain of a mouse uses to operate. You know, over the years, people have realized, no, brains really don't do what neural networks do. And many years ago, people thought, oh, they're like symbolic logic. They certainly aren't. Okay, what's a navigation map? Again, nothing fancy. This is before there was GPS and people wanted to go on a road trip, the Automobile Association they had all these maps, thousands of them, and they put them together bind them together, and you would drive from this city to that city, and when you got to the edge of the map, you could flip it and then go to another map. So they might give you 20 navigation maps. And basically, that's all I'm doing. This is the basis for my architecture. Except I'm doing it in Python, NumPy, not, you know, it's a bit easier than paper. Every module in the architecture, I've been presenting these architectures since 2018 at the BICA conference in Prague. Every module in my architecture uses navigation maps, not just for navigation, but for everything. Why am I doing this? You look at the animal world. Invertebrates, with their tiny little brain, they have some sort of navigation system. You look at vertebrates, they all have navigation systems similar to the mammalian hippocampus to some extent. Hippocampus, it's a structure in our brain. In human brains, it's about, on both sides, it's about 40 to 50 millimeters. And fantastic research was done in the 2000s that we figured out, you know, really well how a system of the brain works, grid cells, place cells, and it could explain how a rat navigates. But also a lot of models started emerging that not only for navigation, but the same techniques that we're using to find a path between this point and this point could be used for memories too. This example, spatial cognition exists in fish, not just mammals. It's, you know, and again, from a genetic point of view, there's homolog genes in this little part of the fish's brain compared to our hippocampus. So the assumption of this architecture is that navigation map-like structures are behind all of our cognition. And given, you know, it's not that surprising given the way evolution works, gene duplication, similar circuits probably got duplicated into our cortex. And again, that's my postulation. In terms of evidence, there's some, you know, that's starting to emerge in terms of the genetics, but basically the postulation behind this architecture I've been working on the last 5 years is that every circuit in our brain, the higher level of the cortex, these are navigation circuits, but they're not used for navigation, they're used for everything. And this is the causal cognitive architecture one. I presented variants of this starting in Prague in 2018 at the BICA conference. And it's very different than building a different type of neural network or a different type of symbolic system. You know, if you're working on a symbolic system, there were in the 1990s, when you said AI to somebody, they thought expert system. And, you know, you can use just any language to do it. There are frameworks, expert systems. Neural networks have been around for a while. However, 2010, you know, they won that ImageNet contest, and they really have taken off since then. And they've done amazing capabilities over the last decade. There's good frameworks, PyTorch, TensorFlow, Chris Elias-Smith in terms of spiking neural networks. However, I can't really, these things don't really apply that well to navigation map-based architecture. It really is different. There's honestly, the navigation map-based architecture is neurosymbolic. There's symbolic elements and connectionist elements in there. So what I've been doing is playing with these networks, building small models in Python, playing with them. And what I found interesting, if I took the results from the intermediate results from the central navigation module, and I fed it back to sensory system, then it could be the next cognitive cycle, it would be treated as a sensory input and would be operated on again and again and again. And what happened is causal behavior emerged from this. My coding is just to simulate these structures, and this would be easy to do. You have some extra neurons making pathways. It's just another pathway, and lots of feedback pathways in mammalian brain. But also at the same time, you're going to get interpretation of some of these results as real sensory features. So you get psychotic features, in other words, hallucinations, delusions. And then you look at humans, which, you know, my architecture is based on. And in fact, 1% of the population has schizophrenia, but up to 17% will have some psychotic-like reaction at some point in their life, associated with the depression, with bipolar disorder, with another type of stress. And animals, they almost never get psychosis, and they don't have causal behavior either. We do. You know, this experiments with chimpanzees proving pretty well that they really don't have full causal behavior. So what am I doing? I'm not using PyTorch. I'm not, you know, using if-then statements. By feeding back these pathways, this wonderful property, causality, emerges from this system. Then it worked for toy problems. There were other problems. I presented this at a previous year's BICA conference. There was an issue with the binding problem, which is an engineering problem. It's not a philosophical problem. And how's it solved? I solved it with, again, navigation maps. I can copy, I call them nav maps, navigation maps. And a navigation map is just this. Think of that map I showed you. And I can, mathematically, I can use linear algebra because it's an array. I can copy navigation maps. I can compare nav maps. I can add maps. I can subtract maps. Very simple operations, simple arithmetic array operations, very simple algebraic array operations. There was also an issue with the binding problem, a temporal binding problem, which the philosophers don't talk about, but which emerged when I built the system. How was it solved? Again, I realized, I can put a vector on my navigation map, a motion prediction vector, and I solved, you know, so I presented the other year CC83, the third version of the causal cognitive architecture, which was binding time, binding space, and had causality. And again, all by just manipulating these navigation maps, really a different type of AI. In the last year, I found that if I fed back navigation maps to this system, and then I subtract something, add something else, I get full inductive analogic reasoning. I will be talking about this in 2 days, and I think it's 10 o'clock to talk. I hope some of you are in the audience interested in this. I'm basically, these equations, they're just really, they're matrices because I'm dealing with arrays. I'm dealing with the navigation maps, but copying navigation maps, moving them around, I get it, inductive analogic reasoning emerging from the system. I'll cover that. So basically, and then once I have analogic reasoning, which I will show at my talk in 2 days on the September 24th, you end up getting a full solution to the symbol grounding problem, which turns out to be an engineering problem and gives the system very nice problem solving abilities. And I'll show a nice example on that. But the point is, by copying navigation maps, comparing, and again, when I say navigation maps, think of that map I showed you, like the road map. Copying navigation maps, comparing maps, adding maps, subtracting maps, adding some vectors to them, matching navigation maps, doing a feedback operation, and I get these wonderful properties coming out of it. My causal cognitive architecture really is just one of many possible implementations, what I call a navigation. Again, think of navigation map-based cognitive architecture. In the paper that's associated with this talk, there's a long list of properties it has, the existence of navigation map-based like structures, the ability, I won't go through all of them because it's in the paper, but they have properties. There's properties of neural networks, properties of an expert system, symbolic logic. This has its own unique properties, a navigation map-based AI. Then I went through the entire Russell and Norvig. That's most of you may be familiar with it. It's a very common textbook on AI. I actually used the 4th edition, which just came out. And I compared it. I went through like Russell and Norvig, talk about logic-based agents in a chapter, and I compare it to navigation map-based architecture. That's in the paper also. I go through a long list of all the chapters. For example, deep learning, and I show how the navigation map-based architecture, it's different. It's not deep learning, very, very different. So again, the theme of my talk, navigation map-based cognitive architecture, it's a new and really represents a different class of artificial intelligence. In Russell and Norvig, they cover it's about 1,000 pages. They cover every field in AI, although cognitive architectures only have one paragraph, unfortunately. So let's look at the work done by Laird, Labière, and Rosenblum. Just like in physics, there's a standard model of physics, which has worked really well for all these messy details of physics. It puts it all together. Very nice, the standard model of physics. Might be changed eventually. It hasn't been changed yet. It's been holding up pretty well. Laird's standard model of the mind, it's pretty much this. There's a working memory, there's declarative long-term memory, there's procedural memory. And, they Laird, Labière, and Rosenblum, they show most of the cognitive architectures will fit into the standard model of the mind. Although, again, for the architecture I showed you, the CCA3, CCA5, which is the causal cognitive architecture, which works on navigation maps, it really doesn't. For example, the declarative, in cells within a navigation map, I have declarative elements, I have procedural elements in the same place. I've got issues where I'm moving maps around for the binding issues. I'm moving maps around for grounding. So honestly, it doesn't even fit into to their standard model of mind. So again, my conclusion that navigation map-based cognitive architecture, I believe it represents a new and different class of artificial intelligence and cognitive architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So now we will proceed with the questions from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. Okay.
Hi, Howard. This is Ricardo here. I'm not appearing in the screen because I'm here in Guadalajara in the audience. So that's the reason my name is.
It's nice to hear you, and hopefully next year I'll see you in person.
Howard, it's interesting. I like it very much. Your presentation. I'm eager to see the next presentation with the details. But my question is related to how we create maps. Whenever I am driving in a road, for example, or in a not a street or a big road, there are many details that will not appear on the map because they are not important. So I will be concerned, for example, with some exits, some ways of changing to a different road, or to particularly important things that should be appearing in the map. Okay, so my question is, when you talk about map navigation system as a general kind of cognitive architecture, a new paradigm for artificial intelligence, how are we supposed to make this triage of what should be in the map and what should not be in the map? So the question of how we construct our map based on the perception that we have of the world, because clearly we are dropping out many of things that are unimportant, and we will need to have other features that are important. So it's not just navigating on a map, but how we construct the map based on our perception of our environment.
I think that's an excellent question, Ricardo, for two reasons. The first reason is in terms of, memory, putting details on maps. One reason I was inspired by this, like in the 2000, there was a lot of good work, eventually culminating with a Nobel Prize in this area because we figured out how part of the brain worked. But very good work showing that it's not just about finding paths, but it's about memory. This circuit, it's really, responsible for how we make memories. So excellent question, and one of the reasons for my motivation in it. The other issue, more direct answer, like how we make it, I formalized my system much better because you can't really give somebody 5,000 lines of Python code to look. I submitted a new paper for Cognitive Science Research Journal. I don't know, it's so long, I had no choice. There's so many equations in it, but it shows actually how I'm parsing out information and what information I'm putting in. Most of the information does not get put into the map. And here's the thing. One thing that also struck me in terms of brain functioning, we really do not, we see things with our eyes and you would think, oh, we're putting megabytes of information into our occipital cortex. We're really not. It's the data flow isn't that much. I think to a large extent, what's happening in humans is we already have, forget about all the theories of the mind and all these neural network things, just listen it's maps. Basically, we have maps in our brain. I already have a map in my brain. I know what to expect. I know what's finding. If there's differences between the map I have and what I'm seeing, then I'll just put some small variations, and it depends how important those differences are. And what I'm saying, actually, I formalized it in 106 equations in a recent paper I submitted, which became a bit longer than I wanted. But it's an excellent question. And how you actually handle those details, it will depend on other factors. There's a context matrix I'm using. There's an emotion vector. It depends what you're looking at. But it's an excellent question. The third question, which you didn't ask, but which probably you're thinking about, how can this be used in a practical way for robot navigation, an area that you're expert on, you do work on? And I'm not sure at this point it really could be, because at this, it's really a theoretical idea I have, and it's starting to get, but the point is, it's not about making robots navigate this. It's really about, how does the brain work, and how, really, how can we make, like, eventually an AGI? But once you have that, navigation works much better. It works much better than, say, in a self-driving Tesla or one of the other cars where, basically brute force and neural networks matching things. Here, I can send you a preprint of my paper if you'd like, and I can show you some of the code. It's an excellent question, because you can't put all the information into the map. And it's very small amounts of the information actually are being put in the map. I don't know, does that answer make sense I just gave?
Yeah, my point is that we cannot go too much further just with a grid map, because if we go to a continuous world, we have an infinite number of grids, of cells in the grid, and it will be unfeasible to put that on a computer. So we need to have a way for discretizing that in a different way. It cannot be a grid map. It needs to be a kind of a topological map. We're just putting the parts that are important, and then maybe using some kind of vector logic for doing that. But the real point is how to discriminate, how I will decide that something needs to be on the map, and the other things I am just going to not pay attention with the details because they are not important at all. But
the way I discriminate is there's already an existing navigation map in the memory, and it'll compare it to what's there, and it'll actually, just like humans, it'll ignore a lot of things. It's not that open to new ideas. It's expecting to see certain things, and if it's expecting to see it, the action will be taken. It's sort of tricky in terms of when do you pay attention to stupid little details, which a lot of times it'll miss, just as humans miss it. Because I think we're using the same system. And I agree with you. It's not, you can't have an infinite system. But I don't think you need as much memory as people think you need to do this. With the navigation maps, you can get by probably with a lot less information. In terms of the maps, they actually are, the hippocampus probably is three-dimensional. There was somebody in Israel doing work with fruit bats, I forget his name, and showing the three-dimensional structure of the hippocampus, like with the bats navigating. So we even though it's two dimensions, the the neurons. It's a sheet of 2 dimensions, but actually there was a paper published a few years ago, interesting 3-dimensional representation. You can do 3-dimensional representations. The brains of animals, they're not that big, and somehow they managed to encode all the information. I think the important thing is what you're encoding, 1, and 2, how do you process it? If you have a neural network for self-driving, you need massive amounts of information. It's pretty brute force and pretty stupid. On the other hand, here, if you're starting to interpret things, I'm saying with the navigation map, you may not need as much data as you're saying. It certainly doesn't have to be infinite. It can certainly be discrete chunks that might be larger than you think. But I wish I was in person. It'd be fun to have a coffee and talk about it, to show you.
Thank you, Howard.
Okay, we have one question from Alexei.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Howard. Nice to see you. And thank you for the interesting talk. Actually, I absolutely agree with you that maps play the key role in the brain at all levels. I would not say that navigation plays the role at every level. And actually, I was a bit surprised when you declared navigation maps a new kind of intelligence or a new kind of AI. You also mentioned the book of Russell Norvig, in which I believe they cover navigation substantially. And it is actually a part of classical AI. Navigation and planning are parts of very classical logical AI, in my view. Well, unless you propose a completely different approach, but navigation is now considered a solved story in AI. So there are no new research coming on navigation in AI. And also, you didn't mention how you do it. You were just talking. I'm very interested myself in your algebra of maps. How do you define it? What does it mean to add, to subtract two maps, maybe multiply and so on? But still, I do not know how you actually use them and what's the key idea that makes it a new kind of intelligence. Maybe indeed there is something absolutely new, but we didn't hear. Well, I guess there was not sufficient time to describe all details. So yeah, my point is that navigation and planning are classical fields in AI, and in most parts they are considered solved already. So why call it new kinds of intelligence? Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting question, Alexei. I agree. Pathfinding has been part of classical AI since the 1960s. People were writing Fortran programs for it. Yeah. However, actually, I think you did work in this area. I think with Dr. Ascoli, 2005.
Also with Professor McNaughton.
And with Nadell.
Because, actually, from that experience, I can tell you that hippocampus is definitely involved in the representation of space, but there is no proof that it is involved in navigation. Navigation itself may be solved by different parts of the brain, actually.
Yes, but again, as I was mentioning to Ricardo, I'm actually not that interested in physical navigation. Let's say using this for a robot to navigate or using this for a self-driving car. What I think the exciting thing is, it's navigation of memories.
Yeah,
it's navigation of memories. And that is such an important idea. And I know that the Nobel Prize was given to 2 people, but there were a lot of people, like including yourself, that did great work in the area. It wasn't just one person; it was a number of people. The ideas came together, and I think in terms of the AI, certainly like in medicine, psychiatry, the ideas I'm saying are crazy. No, but it's not part of medicine. We know what the hippocampus does. We know that's been known for so long also. But in terms of, but what I'm saying is that our whole brain, everything, it's navigation, but not navigation of a street, not navigation of a warehouse, navigation of memories. And in terms of how I'm doing it in the paper, which I recently submitted to Cognitive Science, it went a bit longer, but I tried to explain every operation clearly. I put lots of tables. It ended up being I'm ashamed to say this, it was like 68 pages, which, but that's with the tables and illustrations. The text's not that long. You know, I'm expecting to say this is too long, rejected, but I tried to show very, very clearly there's nothing magic I'm doing. And I'm basically, does the brain do the exact same thing? Certainly not, but I think overall it probably does. I think the, it just, because again, maybe it does other things, but I started building these models in 2018. I presented the first one in Prague, and which I'm really grateful for the bike, having a place like Bike to go where other people are interested in this. And you know, and then properties started emerging that, you know, it's what we see in humans. Hey, psychosis, why don't other animals have causal abilities? Why don't other animals have psychosis? You know, it comes out of the maps. You start seeing the binding problem. It comes out of the maps. The grounding problem, which is a big issue in AI, it's not an issue in this network. It almost emerges immediately. Solutions emerge like perfectly because of the navigation maps. You know, again, and it's the postulation, which, you know, I guess you agree with, is that the hippocampus and navigation of memories is it's behind our brain, and I believe it really forms a different type of AI. And I'm surprised more people don't really work on it. I know navigation it's a whole field. There's self-driving cars now. It's a huge industry, but well, I think they think it's something different.
Personally, I like the term semantic map, not navigation. Okay. And I'm not sure that you are really using algorithms of navigation in solving memory problems. Well, we did in our work with Ascoli, you're right, you pointed to that. But I do not know how this could, well, so it's just a question of terminology in my view, because some people may be upset when you talk about navigation as a new kind of AI. Not okay, me. Fair. Okay.
yeah. Fair enough. I know it's been around since 1960. You know, before I was born, it's been around. It's been around for a long time. I know. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Thank you.
But, yeah. And it was nice to see you, and nice to.
But yeah, nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Okay, so the time for questions is over. If anyone in the audience has any more questions, please contact the corresponding author directly.